Welcome to Pop Psych 101,
where we, licensed therapist Ryan Engelstad,
and licensed psychologist Dr. Hayley Roberts,
break down and analyze how mental health is represented in movies, shows, books, and across the pop culture and social media landscape.
We will determine what lines up with real life and what is just pop culture fantasy.
This is Pop Psych 101. Welcome back to Pop Psych 101. I am licensed therapist Ryan Engelstad, here as always with my co-host, Dr. Hayley Roberts.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Hayley, and I know you are excited for today's episode because it is spooky season, your favorite time of year.
I mean, I do like spooky season.
Right, on the face of it.
Yeah.
But because we hear
jack-o'-lanterns and the candy.
Yes, exactly. But because we here at Pop Psych, generally go into the movies and shows of the season, in this spooky season, that would require us to dive into something a little bit scarier, a little bit spookier. And I think you and I have both gotten this request specifically asking if we're ever going to do this movie.
Yep.
And now it's time. So we're doing Midsommar today.
No, we're not.
At least we are sort of doing Midsommar. We're doing it in a little bit of a different way.
You are doing Midsommar.
I did Midsommar. Hayley is going to absorb Midsommar through my experience of it. So
everybody needs to know that I am a weenie and I cannot do scary movies.
Well, right. There's a reframe there. It's not that you're a weenie. I think you have boundaries with what you like to be entertained by and what you just don't get any enjoyment out of. And I think that's perfectly fine.
It's because I'm a weenie.
But because of that, we wanted to honor those boundaries, but we still wanted to try to find a way to do this movie, which has been requested to us. So I've seen Midsommar several times, and Hayley is going to ask me questions about it and learn all about the plot and the characters and the themes through my watching.
Yeah. So we figured that as a therapist, people come in with their story that they're well versed in, that they've experienced. And as the therapist, I only know what they tell me about it. And so when we were considering doing a spooky season movie, I was like, well, we could do it like this because it does kind of mirror the therapy experience a little bit. And so we're going to try it out and see if I can use my therapy skills in the podcast.
Yes, I'm very excited because I just get to be the person that is asked questions and I don't have to be the therapist. Obviously, I'll do a little bit of my own self-analysis as I had to frequently pause this movie, but I have managed to finish it every time. So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be different. If you liked this sort of different format of our show, please let us know. We'd love to hear feedback in case we want to do this again someday in some way, shape, or form. And if not, please let us know that too. If you just want us to go back to normal,
never do that again.
So we'll keep today's intro brief. Hang out after this break. We will dive into Midsommar. Hey everyone, Ryan here. No ad this week, but a quick request. We would love to know where you follow us, so if you wouldn't mind taking 10 seconds while you're listening to today's episode, reach out to us on your social media of choice. Say hi, say what's up, request an episode topic. We would love to hear from you. And now, back to the episode. Pop Psych 101 discusses mental health as it is portrayed in pop culture media, and because of this, we often cover sensitive topics that can be triggering for some listeners.
We also delve into the characters and plots of these stories, and therefore, spoilers abound.
So please, use your discretion as you listen to the rest of the episode. Midsommar is a 2019 folk horror film written and directed by Ari Aster. The film focuses on a dysfunctional couple who travel to Sweden with a group of friends for a midsummer festival, only to find themselves in the clutches of a sinister cult practicing Scandinavian paganism, as one
Does.
does. As one does. So that's where we lead off, Hayley,
Okay.
with just that sort of really small summary. But we
Mhm.
did have you watch the trailer. So you
Yeah.
have some faces to names, and we can kind of
Yeah.
hopefully give you a
With one
sense of
name.
some of who these characters are. One name,
Yeah.
well, one name's enough for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason why we decided I would watch the trailer is because when somebody comes to see me for therapy or sees you for therapy, we either get a referral, or in my case at my practice, I do a consult phone call. And basically what that is I talk to somebody for a couple minutes about what's going on, what's bringing you in, why are you reaching out to a therapist? And I get like basic details of what's your story.
Yep.
And so we figured the trailer would kind of be that. It would be the bare bones of what's your story.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be kind of like the consult phone call for this movie. So one thing that I want to ask you is, do I tell you what my notes were from the thing,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
do
So
you
what
just
was you?
start and then I
No, I actually like
Okay.
that because I think that is an important thing that maybe most people don't know about therapists, which is what do we do with that very minimal information,
Information?
right?
Yeah.
Because I similarly, because I get all my work is virtual now, so I basically get like a little profile of a
Mhm.
member, and it's like, here are their initial scores on these scales, and here's
Mhm.
what the reasons that they typed into a form why
Uh-huh.
they came or why they're coming into therapy. And we certainly use that information to kind of prepare us for that
Mhm.
actual first meeting. So,
Mhm.
how would you prepare for yourself, kind of knowing what little you got about some of
Yeah.
our main characters, which include Danny, played by Florence Pugh?
That's the name that I got.
Yes, yes.
So I think, firstly, people need to remember that in a trailer, they intentionally don't tell you the main story. You just get some of the pieces. So for me, the notes that I had were relationship struggles, miscommunication, misunderstanding. Sweden was my next one.
Sweden, yes.
Trauma experience, dot, 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 because you see
Hmm.
that Danny has some kind of emotional struggle but they don't tell you what it is. My next question
Hmm.
was, who's the main character in this story? So it was unclear to me whether it was Danny or whether it was her partner, because it focuses on him in the beginning, but then it kind of maybe switches to her. The other two notes that I have are unclear expectations. So there's a lot of questioning
Mm.
around what's going on. Did you know that this was going to happen? Why did you invite us here? That kind of stuff. And
Yep.
then consent and boundaries. We want to
Mm.
leave. No, you can't. We need to get out of here. Stuff like that. And then from your review now, I got the word paganism.
Yes.
So I think the words Sweden and paganism I wrote down because oftentimes it's really important to take into account like cultural aspects of patients. It may end up being nothing for them. It also may end up
Hmm.
being the thing for them. So those are just like keywords that I didn't have any thoughts about, but they stuck out to me. So that's what I got from that.
Yeah, so that's a really good intro because it kind of sets us up with, okay, so I have all these pieces of the puzzle, but not really knowing how they get from where they begin to where
Hmm.
they end up getting
Yeah.
to, right? Um, so it's interesting because the trailer just sort of alludes to Danny's trauma.
Hmm.
So that is the first thing that actually happens in the movie is sort
Okay.
of we meet Danny, and she is concerned about her sister, and we sort of see some messages being sent back and forth. And as a therapist, this was I try not to use the word triggering lightly, but it was very much set up as Danny's concerned about her sister, doesn't know if she's okay or not. Her sister's
Uh-huh.
leaving very vague messages about wanting to be alive, essentially.
Okay.
And her sister's very worried. She talks to her parents, she talks to Christian, who's her boyfriend,
Okay.
and it's a very typical scary movie, like rainy night, and she's just like staring into the glow of her computer like, what's going on?
Hmm.
um and then basically jump cut to the next day, and we see firemen walking through the house that we find out was both Danny's parents and sister were living together.
Mm.
And unfortunately, Danny's sister has committed a murder-suicide.
Of her parents?
Yes.
Oh, no.
So we don't know if it was an intentional, I also want my parents to die, but they died, unfortunately, in their sleep, carbon monoxide poisoning. But yes, very shocking in terms of these sort of scenes that they show you of like the firemen and police and people recovering bodies and taking bodies out, and really a rough way to start
a
this movie
movie.
off. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you here.
Please, yes.
So I would not interrupt a patient at this point. I would let them continue telling the story.
Especially if they were like in a role.
Yeah. However, I think this is a really cool moment for me to kind of express like how my mind works as a therapist. So when I was watching the preview, so in my consult phone call with this movie, there was a line that said, did you do this on purpose? Or like, did you do this all so that we would come here or something like this? So as you tell me the story where kind of it seems as though like the thing that's she's got her focus on or that's keeping her in one place is her family, my mind goes to like, oh, interesting. I wonder if this is related to, did you do this all to get me here? So currently, I don't have any answers for that. I also don't have any specific questions other than like, are these two things related? However, this early in a description or a storytelling or whatever, I would not ask that question. However, as a therapist, I will keep that question in the back of my mind as we move forward.
Yeah, like mental bookmark, sort of like what
like,
else is going on here?
Is this related to that nugget that they gave me earlier? Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. So in the sort of aftermath of that, we see Danny being consoled by her boyfriend, Christian, who and this is in the trailer as well, Christian's friends are basically like, why are you still with this girl? You wanted to break up with her a year ago. And then as he's consoling her, it becomes very clear he's not going to break up with her after she has just gone through this incredible trauma. Yeah.
Did we know that they were struggling before this?
There were no signs. There was very little shown of them interacting before this, other than like, hey, I'm worried about my sister. I'm sure she'll be fine.
So we find out about their relationship after we know about the murder-suicide.
Yes. Okay. Yes, we find out much more about their relationship afterwards. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we know from the jump that Christian, even though he's in many ways like committed to Danny, is sort of in many ways checked out, and his friends in particular are like encouraging him to not be with her anymore, even knowing all of these things that she's been through. So then it comes out that Christian and his group of friends have been invited by their mutual friend, who I believe his name is Ingmar, to come to Sweden. So the Christian and his friends, Mark and Josh, I think at the very least, Josh and Mark are cultural anthropology students, which is not a major you see a lot in movies, but obviously connected to the specific story. So they are interested and very excited at the opportunity to go to this festival that they've been invited to because of their major, and Josh in particular is writing a thesis on European Midsommar festivities.
Oh, okay. So he gets to participate in what he's interested in. Is one of them... Oh, I'm blanking now.
Chidi, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Josh, who's the cultural anthropology major and is writing the thesis, is played by the actor who plays Chidi on A Good Place. Yes. Yeah, and it's a little, obviously I'm a huge fan of The Good Place, so watching Chidi as sort of like
almost.
basically is pretty funny. So we see that they're interested in and excited to go on this trip. And then, of course, because now Danny and Christian are still together, Danny hears about the trip going on and the fact that it's coming up and shows interest in it. She's obviously just been through this extreme trauma, but she's kind of like, oh, I didn't realize this was a thing that you were doing. And she's kind of hurt to find out this was a thing that he might have been doing without telling her. And 2 or 3 interactions later, he sort of out of guilt for everything that she's been through, offers her the opportunity to come with them. despite his friends' sort of discouragement of that
Okay. So it
invitation.
kind of seems like he feels guilted into inviting her rather than being like, I want to include her because she's struggling. Kind of like, well, she's struggling, so I can't leave her behind.
Yes, it's much more of that
Okay.
flavor because we see as the guys are talking about this trip, it's all the Swedish women and and
Oh,
this and
right.
that, and
Uh-huh.
it's sort of very much like this boys trip kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And now with Danny coming, it sort of shifts, the tone of the trip, especially as we see her start to have some of her, which they show in the trailer, some of her sort of trauma, we might call them what, like echoes, flashbacks.
Okay.
She is in the plane and is having memories, and she has to go into the lavatory and is like, we might say having a panic attack. Like she's still very much in the midst of this traumatic experience.
Is there some indication of how soon the trip is after the loss of her family?
Yes. So I want to say it's within, let's say, spring semester to summer, because
Okay.
it's basically this happened, maybe I'm going to say like February, March, like it's clearly cold. And then
So
obviously
about 6
this
months.
festival's happening in the middle of the summer. So yeah, so less than 6 months has
Okay.
gone by
Okay.
before this trip
Okay.
comes up.
Because that,
Yeah,
affects the process of grief is time. And so
100%.
so I
Yes.
think knowing kind of how soon after a big change this is taking place also plays a role in like her mental health and her grief and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if it was
Yes.
like right after, I'd be like, don't take a trip immediately after you lose your whole family." Okay.
Well, right. And I think, and you can sort of see her, they do show her sort of wrestling with like, is this a thing I should be doing right now kind of thing? Like, I don't
Okay.
know. It's a lot. Obviously, this is not just, I'm taking a trip to Paris. I'm taking a
Hmm.
trip to this village in the middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
very much a like isolated cultural experience,
Hmm.
which has been framed to this point as like a very unique and exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
Little did they know,
Well, it
sort
sounds
of what it
unique and
actually is going to be.
exciting.
It does, sure. And it's very much like a college thing of like, if you told four college boys what they could do, they would be unlikely to have a lot of hangups about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I incorrectly identified their Swedish friend as Pele. His brother is Ingmar,
Okay.
from the Swedish commune. But yeah, so Pele, and you can see
So
it's sort of taking.
Pele is coming with them, like
Pele has
from
invited.
America.
Yeah, he's from there, and has been more or less. It's implied that he's sort of doing a cultural exchange sort of thing, and is
Okay.
inviting friends back to the commune, as part
Okay.
of this festival experience. Yes.
Okay.
So now we know that they're going to go on this trip,
Hmm.
and immediately the sort of vibes of, well, what's this relationship going to be like? How are they going to handle this? Because certainly without knowing anything, the guys are like, oh, well, how much time are we going to spend in the city in Amsterdam? And it's like, here are their expectations. And Pele's immediately like, oh no, like we're getting to the airport and we're driving for 4 hours north, like up
Hmm.
until the part of Sweden where like the sun never sets.
Uh-huh.
And this is an immediately like a tone setting part of this experience where
Yeah.
this is gonna be unsettling in a way you
Uh-huh.
did not think it would be.
Yeah.
So they go on their long road trip and they finally
Mhm.
arrive at the
So at
commune.
this point, before
Yeah,
we move on, at this
please,
point,
yeah.
do you have any thoughts about like their like reactions to their psychology or their state of mind, like anything that we would normally bring up in one of our regular sessions? Are you having a reaction yet?
Really, it's just, I mean, just to Danny and Christian's relationship. I mean,
Okay.
we don't see really enough of the friends to have any sense of like where they're at.
Okay.
Um,
So far we've kind of discussed the themes that you considered anyway, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a relationship that's on the rocks.
Mhm.
And maybe they have differing ideas of how on the rocks it is.
Okay. Okay,
But
so Danny thinks that it's going better than it is.
Well, yes, so we can imagine why she might, right? When you go through a very traumatic experience and you still have, let's say, whatever your support system still looks like, it's
Mhm.
reasonable to expect that you might become very attached or even dependent
Uh-huh.
on that support.
Got it. And does that seem to be like the main cause of Christian struggles? Is that like she's overwhelming him with emotion?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's one sort of brief scene before they leave for Sweden where it's clear Danny's like been in bed all day.
Mhm.
And, Christian comes back to check on her and he's like, oh, I'm going out to a party. I'm going to see some people. And she's like, oh, well, maybe I'll come. And he's like, oh, are you sure? Like, it's totally fine if you want to stay in
Mhm.
bed.
Mhm.
So it's not like, yeah, great. Glad you're feeling better. Definitely come out to this party. It's more like, actually, I was fine with you just being here
Yeah,
and
but
me
it's also
going and doing
not
my own
saying
thing.
like, actually, I need a moment by myself with my friends. And I think this is something that we all often talk about is you don't need to be your partner's therapist or your friend's therapist or your
Nope.
family member's therapist. If you feel overwhelmed by their emotional experience, be validating, be supportive, and say, I don't have the capacity or the skill set to help you in the way that you need to be helped. Please
Hmm.
consider calling Ryan or Hayley.
Well, and it's interesting because even I think they in the trailer, I want to say Mark is like she needs a therapist,
But he says it in
and
such a
it's said
sassy
in a
way.
oh my gosh, he says it in a tone that's like, she's crazy or
Uh-huh.
she needs, but he's also not wrong,
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking was I was like, he said it, he
right?
just the way he said it was
Yes,
crappy. Yeah.
right, super crappy,
Mhm.
and that's Mark in a nutshell for you. We're gonna go
Oh,
into
great.
how Mark gets himself into trouble, but
Okay. Okay, great. So they've taken this road trip and they're headed up where the sun doesn't go down.
where the sun only shines,
Yeah.
yes.
This time of year.
Yes, this time of year and in the summer, yes. So, we're maybe optimistic that this is going to be good for the relationship or good for everyone. And of course, upon arriving, immediately they are offered mushrooms,
Okay.
like psychedelic mushrooms.
And they know that that's what they're being offered.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And it's very much framed as a way to just sort of like connect with nature as they are coming into this new experience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's a classic sort of peer pressure situation. And, much as the way that you said, is it a good idea to go on a trip to a
Trip.
whole
Yeah.
new place after
Uh-huh.
trauma? Like it's similarly like, is it a good idea to go on a psychedelic trip,
Yeah. To take a trip. Yeah.
after a very
Mhm.
serious traumatic event? And Danny appropriately is like, I don't think that's a really good idea
Mhm.
for me.
Mhm. And I think that's a very important part for me, right? Because for some
Yes.
people, that could be a really meaningful way to process their grief
Sure.
under the right circumstances.
Hmm.
This movie doesn't seem like it's the right circumstances.
Unfortunately not. And again, a really good example of this relationship, sort of how they are attempting to connect and support with each other, but really are missing the base.
Uh-huh.
Christian sort of seeing Danny's reluctance is like, oh, totally fine. I won't take them either. And a show of solidarity, right?
Yeah, and support.
Yeah. And he sort of offers, like, oh, I could take them later, or we can, do whatever. And the person who offered the mushrooms along with Mark is like, well, then we'll be on completely different timelines and different trips. And like, everyone will be off the whole time.
Mhm.
Basically, like, that's a terrible idea, Christian and Danny. Don't take it at different times. So
Yeah,
they're
there's
both
only
kind of
one way
like,
to do this.
yes. So Danny relents and she's like, no, it's fine. I can do it. It's fine. She sort of talks herself into it. No, and
Mhm.
they weren't really peer pressuring Danny as much as they were peer pressuring Christian.
Mhm.
And Danny, and experiencing that dynamic,
Mhm.
wanting to make it okay for Christian to have this.
Yeah, she reversed the support, right?
Yes,
So like he
exactly.
said, "Fine,
Yeah.
I won't take it in support of you." So she was like, "Fine, I will take it in support of you."
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where we find this sort of awkward, sort of codependency, sort of co-support, sort of dynamic
Mhm.
getting established. And so they take mushrooms.
Yeah, I guess you're right there because she easily could have been like, hey, it's okay. I'm not going to do it, but you absolutely can. Like, she doesn't have to take them for it to
Does
be
not
okay
have
for
to,
him to
right.
take them, right?
Exactly right.
And he gets to decide what he does regardless of what she does.
That's right.
But what you're kind of setting up is, no, there's this kind of like, well, if you do it, I'll do it, or if you don't do it, I won't do it kind of codependency.
Yeah, and meanwhile,
Okay.
you can tell that either one or both of them is uncomfortable as they sort of navigate that decision and subsequent
Mm,
decisions as well, right? So he's like, "Are you sure?" Meanwhile, he's obviously happy, excited that he gets to take mushrooms in this new
mhm,
place and with his friends.
mhm,
And, as we can imagine, she doesn't have a great time
mhm.
on mushrooms. It sort of starts innocently enough, the trees are breathing and she can see the energy coming up from the roots of the tree, and a very sort of stereotypical psychedelic
Nature
experience
experience.
portrayed as they are portrayed in movies and TV
Mhm,
frequently. But Danny quickly gets uncomfortable with this experience,
mhm,
partially because it was at this moment, and they show this moment in the trailer, when Mark is like, "Why is the sky still blue?" Obviously, they're all
mhm,
tripping at that point,
mhm.
and it's like, "Well, it's 9 p.m. Why is the sky blue?" And like paranoia is setting in. So her
Okay.
discomfort is now being felt as a result of this sort of group dynamic starting to
Mhm,
fracture a little bit.
mhm.
And then, so she tries to compose herself and walk away. She walks towards another group where another one of the sort of welcoming people was like, "Hey, are you okay?" And Danny's paranoia was that a group of women
Mhm.
were laughing at her and mocking her.
Mm. My first question is,
And
were they?
so it's unclear.
Okay.
The person who is trying to comfort her is like, "That's not what's happening. They're just having a good time.
Mhm. But it's
Everything's
unclear if
fine."
that's gaslighting or if
Exactly.
they truly aren't laughing at her.
Right. Which starts to become a theme of this place. Is
Okay.
what you are seeing
What's
accurate to
really
your
happening?
perception of it, or
Yeah.
is it such a distinct cultural difference that it's something that you're going to have to adapt to?
Is
Right.
that both a theme in the movie and as the watcher of the movie?
Yes.
Okay. You know that I
Yes.
like when movies do that.
I,
Like
I,
when they
I
mirror
yes,
the
for
character's
sure.
experience.
Yes.
I'm still not watching it.
Yeah, because as a person who's traveled, I've certainly found myself in cultures where it's like, "Oh, something's weird or off about this place or my experience of this place. I wonder if that's just weird for me, or would this also be weird to someone who's acclimated to this
Mhm,
culture?"
mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you find yourself having to make decisions to adapt or not adapt and
Mhm,
sort of protect yourself within that dynamic, right? So
mhm.
that's what Danny does. Is she sort of hears that feedback and is like, "Okay, like if you say so." And the guy also mentions like they're all just happy because their family is together for the first time in a long time. They're just laughing and
Oh.
giggling. And she basically hears the word family and
Oh.
sort of has this like this sort of zoom out crisis where
Mhm.
now she runs off to the, what is this, initially a bathroom, but then she like sees her sister in the
And the
mirror in the
reflection, yeah, that was in
bathroom.
the trailer,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then runs out of the bathroom and into the woods, and immediately you're like, "Oh my gosh, you've only
Stay
been
out of the
here like
forest.
an hour or two. This is a disaster."
Yeah.
And then they jump cut to her waking back up basically under the same tree that everybody was under. So
Yeah.
either she found her way back in her, we don't know, trauma fugue state maybe,
Uh-huh.
or somebody found her and helped get her back and
Or she never
she was
left.
fine, or she never left. Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
I don't like it.
Right. So that's just their
Yeah.
introduction to this place. They're not even officially at the commune
The
yet
fest Oh,
at this stage.
shoot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, one thing that I'm thinking, like, from an act perspective,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes I'll say to people, like, they may be laughing at you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'll never know. Even if they tell you that they're not, they might be.
Hmm.
that's not in your control. What is in your control is how you respond to your thought that they are laughing at you.
Yeah.
I usually suggest like collect the evidence you can, right?
Sure.
Ask, check, whatever, but you could still not get all the evidence.
And also the meaning, right? What meaning are you taking from it? If they are laughing at you, what not I hate to say what difference does that make, but what meaning does that hold for you if they
Yeah.
are, right?
Mhm.
Because that could be a very innocent, like, oh, look, a foreigner is
Mhm.
stumbling around while on a mushroom trip. Like, that could
That's
just be a funny
funny.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily you are doing something wrong or they're
Uh-huh.
mocking you. It could just be they are just enjoying themselves,
Mhm.
in a shared space with you, right?
And even so, like if
Yeah,
you have a reaction to it, that's what matters, right? So
totally.
what
Yeah.
is your interaction with that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. However,
S-
you're being gaslighted potentially, maybe, who knows?
Well, right. And that is the tone that's being established of this place is
Mhm.
I know you think you're seeing something weird,
Mhm.
but this is totally normal. Trust us.
Oh, trust us. Okay.
Yeah, well, they don't explicitly say that, but it's very
Yeah.
much the vibe, right? It's like
Mhm.
this is how we live here. Like
Take
for
it
the
or
week
leave
that you're
it, but you're
here, that
here.
you're a member
Yeah.
of our community. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it reminded me of when I've worked with people who have had like a culture shock going to, let's say, a new school or after moving or
Yeah.
going to college for the first time.
Mhm.
And that same sort of adaptation, adjustment,
Mhm.
like, is this normal?
Mhm.
And I think that's such a relatable experience. And it's an interesting one as a choice of, a horror movie, right?
Mhm.
Because, we've been set up to believe that this is just going to be sort of like an exciting, interesting cultural experience for everyone.
Mhm.
And very quickly, we are finding out that it's not quite meeting those expectations, at least in the way that they expected.
Mhm. Okay.
So
Okay. So what happens
any other
next?
follow-up questions? Yeah, I was gonna
Not
say.
right now.
So
Yeah.
so we're basically formally welcomed into the commune. We see everybody in their traditional Swedish commune garb.
Mhm.
We start to see some of the like interpersonal interactions, and it's very much like the opening shots of it are very much like idyllic, like look at this beautiful and the hills and the flowers and everybody's hugging and running around in circles and they do school outside and
Mhm.
all these lovely, it's very much off the grid, like there's not an electrical device in sight and all these sorts of things. And even with that, because we've been established with it doesn't get dark here, right? Immediately
Mhm.
it's like, right, but it's 10 o'clock, so we all need to go to bed.
Mhm. Have you ever been somewhere where the sun essentially doesn't go down?
No, and I'm terrified of it, if I'm being totally honest. I think you would
Okay.
really mess with me.
Okay. So I have had family that lives in the Shetlands, which is
Mm,
like north of Scotland.
yeah, sure.
And we went to go visit them in the middle of summer. And we spent a whole day and we stopped and we got takeout. And then like we got back home and we were like, okay, well, now what are we gonna do?
Yeah,
And my aunt literally went, it's 10 at night. And we were like, oh, okay. And it was really weird that first night. And then you go to bed, there's blackout curtains, all that stuff.
of
You
course.
wake up the next morning and it's totally normal. However, the next night, you're actually more used to the fact that the sun and time aren't correlated, and it's
Mhm.
not as weird the following days. Like you pay more attention to the
You
clock
acclimate pretty
itself.
quickly. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
but
sure.
that first night is like it's very strange.
Well, yeah, because I've had, jet lag or I'm trying to think what trip we were like, we flew to it might have been Ireland,
Mhm.
but we took, like, a late night flight, so we arrived in the morning, but we didn't
Mhm.
have a night or what. I don't remember exactly
Uh-huh,
how
yeah,
what
yeah,
how
yeah.
the hours played out, but it was
Mhm.
like all of a sudden we were very tired, but it was the middle of the day,
Mhm.
and well, it's like, yeah, I guess we could go to sleep, but then if we wake up and it's 11 p.m. and we've just gotten 8
Yeah, when
hours,
you're
like
jet
that's not a
lagged,
good
stay
idea.
awake as long as
Right.
you can and go to
Yeah,
bed
oh,
at a normal
good.
time.
Like, but that whole adjustment experience is very off-putting for me because I'm
Mhm.
the type of person who's if it's daytime, I want to be doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like I need to wait for it to be dark to be like, oh, okay, good. Now it's okay for me to be tired and to not want to do stuff anymore.
Yeah, it's a
So
very strange experience. Okay.
so
Yeah, so you had mentioned like, oh, wait, we should probably go to sleep.
yeah. So they get shown to their sort of quarters, which is like a giant like community space where there's just like
Okay.
a bunch of beds on the sort of perimeter of this very interesting building in the sense of it's like the walls are covered in these ornate murals, and on the murals are sort of interesting scenes depicting either the seasons or some of the rituals that we are sort of yet to observe that
Okay.
occur in this community.
Okay. I've got a feeling that they are going to see themselves depicted in these murals. Keep going.
It's not that explicit, but it is, it is sort of like, oh, well, we're here in the summer and this is what they do in the summer. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And then, as they're shown around the rest of the uh, community, of course, like any scary movie, it's like there's one building that no one's allowed in. And it's
Mm.
like, that's a very special building for like the
Mhm.
last ceremony of Midsommar, and nobody
Mm.
goes back there. Which is such a classic, like, oh, okay, cool. Then well, obviously we'll just respect that, right? Nobody would go against those
Very
community
forbidden
rules,
fruit.
right?
Yeah.
Well, right, and yet we know our friends that are with Danny and Christian are cultural anthropology students, so they're there to study. So they are asking questions like, "Can I take pictures? Can I, if I'm, recording events, can I, obviously I won't use names, much as you and I would if we were
Mm-hmm.
doing case studies or things like that. But there's already this tension between these, particularly Josh and Christian, who are more or less there to study things, and Pele and some of the other leaders who are like, you can observe and you can participate, but kind of like chill with the whole, we want to take pictures, or we want to see your sacred texts, or we want to go in the secret buildings. Kind of like,
You can
please
participate, but don't
respect
ask
our,
any questions. Yeah.
well, yeah, kind of respect our traditions, please. And,
Okay.
and yeah.
So they come from like a be honorable rather than like we're sketchy direction.
Yes, because even as they start to reveal some of these traditions, which I'll tell you about next, they do it from a very much of like a self-reverential, like, these are our traditions, like, this is who we are. You might find this weird, but we've been doing this forever. Please understand us, right? And along with respecting us, like, don't try to change us just because you're here to visit.
Yeah, you're in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a side story, real quick, it reminds me of when I was in college. I went to Paris, which was my, I think more or less my first like truly international traveling experience. And one of the first restaurants we went to, trying to order something for dinner off a fully French menu, I saw something that looked like ground beef, and I was like, yeah, I think I should be fine with that.
Oh no.
And keep in mind, like, this is so embarrassing because I had taken, 4 or 5 years of French at that point. Like, I should have been able to figure some of this stuff out. But I basically ordered like the raw beef dish.
No.
Yeah, but being the uncultured American that I was, I asked them if they could cook it.
No.
Like, they brought it out. Yes, they brought it out, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to eat that. And I was like, oh, could you, I might have said, like, could you take it, but could you cook it, or could you do anything? And they did, but I mean, he was
so mad.
Totally so mad, and justifiably so. I could have asked for help.
Yes, you could have asked for help on the menu. Also, you could have asked for something else, right? Instead of
I could have just had something else instead of
And also, like, you asked if they could cook it, and they did. So, like, it's not the like culturally the most savvy move. However, like, you wanted cooked beef, and you eventually got it, and they were annoyed with you, and that's okay.
but I still paid, and
Yeah.
and
And they talk about the dumb American.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure I gave them plenty of ammunition.
Oh,
But
no.
instead of sort of casually acquiescing to this group's curiosity, they're very defensive and very protective. It would have been like if this waiter was like, "No, you may not ask for this
Which is what I
beef to
expected
be
them
cooked."
to do.
Absolutely, and I would have honored that for sure.
You would have been like, great, bring me some fries.
Yes, exactly right. Because so the first sort of cultural event that we see is they have this big dinner, and they're clearly honoring two of the elder members of the community.
Okay.
And a lot of them is like them just speaking Swedish. So you don't know what they're saying or sort of exactly what's going on, because it's from the perspective of these tourists,
Danny
basically.
and Christian,
right?
yeah.
So we have dinner, and then it's like, okay, now it's time for the ritual. And the two elders are sort of brought up on like very nice, like ornate chairs, and they're taking a trip basically to cliffside area.
Okay.
And the whole community is at the bottom of the cliff. And, we're sort of, again, from the perspective of Danny and Christian, sort of like, oh, this is weird. Like, what are we doing here? Like, what's going on?
My heart is beating so fast.
How much do you want me to tell you of this?
I mean, you just go ahead and tell me, and if it's too much,
Okay.
I'll stop you. But I'm feeling like these two people are going to get thrown off the cliff edge.
So first, we see the elder woman walk up to the cliff edge, and she throws herself off the cliff.
Of course she does.
She throws herself off, and she doesn't make it, nor is she expected to.
Do you like see her splatter?
So the most uncomfortable part of this movie for me, because there were not very many like jump scares. What they did do quite frequently was, I think, what generally be referred to as like body horror. Like, yes,
so like gruesome.
we're going to show you some really gruesome depictions of what this would actually look like.
No.
Oh, yes.
So you see what her body would look like if she hit the ground.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
Very much so.
I just caught my what my video looks like. My face is mortified.
So, as you can imagine, Danny and Christian, and there's one other like American couple that had also been invited there that we're introduced to.
Okay.
They see this woman jump, and they're immediately horrified, as you can imagine. Like, what is happening? None of them understand, and this has not been explained to them in advance.
Yeah. What is Danny's reaction to it?
Very much like yours, just sort of like inaudible,
face gasping,
like
grabbing.
What is happening? So as they're all sort of reacting to the woman having jumped, it is the elder man's turn. He jumps, but he doesn't achieve what I think is meant to be achieved by jumping off the cliff.
What does that mean?
He basically like breaks his legs.
But he stays alive.
But he's still alive. And this is a horror to the commune residents.
Yeah.
Because he has not successfully achieved the ritual, right?
Yeah.
So
like
what
shame
they do,
and what do they do?
So what they do when someone doesn't
they hit him over the head with a rock.
No, they have like a giant ceremonial hammer. And right through like the face. Just like right through the face, and like multiple times.
Is this one of the times when you paused the movie?
Oh yeah. I mean, not like to see it, but like I
need to go wash my hands.
Yeah. And again, like very graphic.
Okay,
and
so
obviously,
my therapeutic response now
God,
is that I need to go get therapy. Is that Danny has just lost her sister to a suicide, right?
Yes.
And then she watches this suicide, I guess. In a unexpected but like honored way, which like I think would be horrifying, because just as you're describing it's for Westerners this is horrifying.
100%. Yes.
And so, like, I think that would be, like, super hard for her to, like, process kind of, although it's not how her sister died, like, kind of watching somebody die at their own choice
Yeah,
in such a gruesome way, there's, I feel, no way that her brain wouldn't kind of combine those two, like, almost see
absolutely.
that woman as her sister.
Yes.
And then I guess also, like, I guess the man technically gets murdered, which is kind of her parents.
Yeah.
Um, or, like, mercy killing, I don't know.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
but then also, like, if she were able to, like, become comfortable with the situation, which I don't think she will at any point, but if she were able to, like, take
Right.
on this, like, ritualistic meaning of the culture, I think someone
Mhm.
choosing to take their own life would take on a different emotional narrative for her, which could be really healing with regard to
Absolutely.
her sister. However, I feel that
Mhm.
there's nothing healing about this story. Okay, you can go on.
Well, so it's so interesting so that you said that because as all the Americans, non-residents are freaking out
Mhm.
and like, "Oh, we have to leave," like a very natural reaction, like, we can't be here."
How I feel.
One of the other village elders kinda comes in from the perspective of like, this was an honor for them.
Yeah.
Just as
It's like,
they
what's it, seppuku in Japan,
sure, yes.
right? Like the
That's like,
honor
samurais and things
suicide.
like that,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah.
mhm, yep. This was an honor for them, much in the way they looked forward to this day. I too look forward to the day when it's
Mm,
my
mhm,
turn.
mhm,
So the commune, the village people are all sort of like, on one hand, understanding that, hey, we realize this was a lot for you. But on the other hand, just like very calm and defensive of just like, this is how we do things here. Like they were very old.
mhm,
They could not contribute to the community in any sort of positive way any longer. It
mhm.
was their time. And
And this is where, when I spoke at the beginning of,
yeah.
like, marking down, like, Sweden, paganism, things
Hmm.
like that, like, knowing somebody's why did I say that weirdly? Knowing somebody's culture is
Yes.
really important. So, for example, I think we've talked about this before, hallucinations, if seen by some Latin American or African cultures,
Hmm.
not associated with mental struggles or mental illness.
Nope.
However, in our culture, hallucinations very much are. And it's simply cultural programming,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the separate couple, after sort of observing this, the sort of other Americans that we
Hmm.
briefly get to know, the next day they decide that they want to leave.
Yeah, they're gone.
They're, you know what, this is like, no offense to you guys, but this is not for us. And because,
I feel that.
yeah, because Christian and Josh are students of culture, they're a little bit quicker to be like, this was weird, but who are we to judge? Like, I
Christian
think
and Josh or Mark and Josh?
basically all of them. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
Danny is the most affected. Christian's kind of just like, that was crazy.
Yeah.
And Josh is very quick to be like, oh, what an interesting ritual they performed
Yeah.
here. um,
Cheating through and through.
yes. So we sort of see the variety of reactions that they have. And of course, in the process of the other American couple trying to leave, we do get this sort of vaguely ominous lack of support from the community in
Hmm.
allowing them to leave.
Hmm.
And they basically get separated. So the man, I think, of the couple is like permitted to go get a car from the community.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, and then the girl finds out that he was allowed to go get a car into the community. She's like, oh, well, why didn't he tell me? Or why didn't, and it's just like, oh, well, I'm sure he'll be back. Basically, he disappears.
Oh no. Do we ever find him?
And then she disappears
Oh
subsequently.
no.
But they tell Josh and Christian and Danny that, oh, he came back and got her and they left.
Maybe.
Meanwhile, we never see any of that happen.
Yeah.
So there's this vibe of like, well, do we just trust you that this is what happened? Or is it like, oh, that's weird. Well, we didn't really know them that well anyway.
Hmm.
Hope they
Are
get home okay.
they already starting to kind of question the, like, trustworthiness of the community when this happens?
Not really.
Okay. So they have no reason to question that this is what happened,
Nope.
right? So
Right.
the last time I watched the last time I intentionally watched a scary movie, I watched What Lies Beneath.
Sure.
And in that movie, the bathroom starts like steaming, and I was like, "Don't go in it! Don't go in it! Don't go in it!" And my friend was like, "Wouldn't you go in if your bathroom was steaming?" And I was like, "Not if I knew I was in a horror movie." And the reason I tell
Right.
that story is because I think that that's really speaking to, like, as you're watching this, you're like, "Oh, did that happen? Did they not happen?" But you have the perspective of, I know what I'm getting myself into. These characters don't yet. Like, currently, they have no reason to believe that there's anything kind of sketchy going on. And so, if I was at a totally not sketchy hotel and people I didn't know were gone and the hotel manager said, like, "Oh yeah, they rented a car and left last night," I would be like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I'd move on. So,
yeah, and that's basically what we see from Danny and Christian is they give one of those cursory, like, oh, that's weird that they didn't say goodbye, but then it's
but
like
we don't really know him.
out of sight, out of mind. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the sort of tone that we're getting shifted into, though, is
weird things are starting.
There are some weird things about this place. Yeah. So subsequently, we see the group start to make unwise decisions in subsequent fashion. So a good example of this is Mark, who is clearly the worst of the group. He's just like, he's like kind of like a frat bro. He's kind of, she needs to be in therapy, but like in a negative way. This has been his tone the whole time, like annoyed that he couldn't hang out in the city and meet the Swedish girls, like all of this stuff. So the morning after the initial ritual, they're basically walking around and he's like, I have to go to the bathroom. So he goes number one on like the sacred tree.
Oh no.
Basically, it's like a dead tree that had been left to die because it is also where they like bury their elders. And he's, taking a piss on the tree. And the other elders sort of see him doing this and freak the heck out.
Oh, yeah.
How could you do this? This is a desecration. We're getting a lot of this translated in subtitles, but it's
because he
clear.
didn't know, right?
Well, he didn't know.
Okay.
And Pele, the friend who invited them all here, is kind of like, hey, just like walk away. Like, I'll try to take care of this. But it's clear that like Mark is on he's on the list.
Yeah, the list
of like, we have our eye on you. Like, and there are a lot of ominous scenes where now Mark just like feels like people are watching him at all times, which they are. And then at, I guess, the next night's dinner, one of the young ladies just sort of invites Mark to, I want to go show you some things. And Mark...
in kind of like an enticing way?
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so. And Mark is, because we know him, he was sort of interested in the possibility of hooking up or just sort of like...
he's like, finally.
She's going to go show me some things. Like, great, I'm out of here.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Yeah, like this guy's staring at me. I get away from him. I go with her. And Mark is never seen alive again. After that, I'm going away. He's never seen alive.
Means he's seen dead.
Yes.
Oh,
so...
Bye, Mark.
Yeah, well, that's a very classic like horror trope is right. Like you opened the devil book, you recited the lines or you crossed the line or you did whatever, you did the thing. So now you're the first one to go.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we don't see Mark murdered. What we do see is, and this is the sort of next bad decision, is Josh is... trying to get more information for his study and his thesis that he's doing, right? And he's been given a lot of access. He's talking to the elders about their sacred books. And then he asks them, he's like, could I take pictures? And they're like, no, absolutely not. So Josh makes the unwise horror movie decision of sneaking out in the middle of the night and taking some cell phone pictures of the sacred book.
Yeah. Don't do the thing in the horror movie.
Don't do anything you're told not to do. And while he is taking pictures, classic horror movie trope, we kind of see someone shuffling that's also in the sacred building that he didn't know about. And he sort of hears a noise and he turns around and he's like, "Oh, Mark!" Like he scared the hell out of me. and it's just Mark's face on someone else's body.
Isn't that Face Off? Isn't that Nicolas Cage movie?
Yes.
Wait,
but
hold on.
like,
Is it like they've like removed the skin?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Okay.
Mark has been skinned, and whoever has snuck up on Josh is just wearing Mark for the season.
God.
Yes.
For the season.
Yes.
Okay.
And as Josh is sort of like horrified by what he's seeing, he gets the ceremonial hammer to the head.
Okay, so he gets killed in that moment too.
That is enough of. That's basically the last we see of Josh.
Okay.
So things are happening very quickly
my
now.
mind went to curiosity of like, what would it be like to have a traumatic experience like that, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't get to experience the trauma really because he
doesn't.
Smashed.
It's very brief for him. He is dispatched as a result of his inappropriately. I'm just trying to find a lot of words to use differently.
Kind words
to describe. Yeah, he doesn't get the chance to experience the loss.
Mm-hmm.
But as this is happening sort of overnight, what we do find the next morning is Danny and Christian are like, where are Mark and Josh?
Mm-hmm.
And what we do know is that, I guess, over the course of Josh's actions, he had actually stolen a separate holy book. So they sort of make an announcement to the community, like, this book has been stolen. If you see it, or if you know where it is, like, please return it. We won't harm you or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of alluded to that because Josh and Mark are missing, either they took it together. At least this is the story they're telling Danny and Christian, right? Either they took it together and ran off, or whatever decisions they're making, but they're missing for all intents and purposes. Like, we don't know where they are. At least Danny and Christian don't know where they are.
I was going to say, we know that they're
We
dead.
know that they are both no longer with us. Yes.
So now we're aware that things are definitely off. They're still not totally aware.
Correct. And it's tough because of the way it's partly because of the way this is filmed and the sort of very much like the cultural study perspective. It's very much like as soon as it's like, oh, that's so weird, we don't know where Josh and Mark are. It's just like, okay, anyway, back to today's activities. Danny, you're going off with the women to cook meat pies, and Christian, they're
off to cook meat pies?
Yes.
No.
Yes, yes, she is. And Christian, you're off to meet with some of the village elders. And it's at this point that we start to see, you would think, oh, well, it's just Danny and Christian left. Like, this is their chance to kind of form a bond and sort of, but it's the opposite is actually happening. It was Danny's birthday over the course of the couple of days that they were there. And
he forgot.
Well, he like made a little flower necklace for her.
That's nice.
And he did something sort of small and symbolic. But like the Pele, the friend who invited her there, actually wished her happy birthday first, and then like gave her this beautiful like hand-drawn portrait of her that he had made for her. And she was sort of like, oh, Christian hasn't even done anything yet. And then in comparison, what Christian did sort of felt like small potatoes, like in comparison.
Yeah.
So there's this tension between them where it's like, do you even want to be with me on this trip? Do you even because much in the way the girls had sort of picked off Mark, there is this girl within the community who's sort of been like periodically teasing Christian
in like a flirty way.
Yes, very much.
I think that
so.
was in the trailer.
Yeah, she sort of kicks him and like looks at him as he goes by, right? And that when they're split up, Danny goes off with the women to cook. Christian is brought to the elders because the elders have granted Christian permission to mate with this maiden girl who has, identified him as the, person she wants to lose her virginity to, basically.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay,
Yes.
so let's kind of explore a
Yeah,
therapy
pause
topic
there.
here for a second.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
when they get
Mm-hmm.
separated for the meat pies and the elders,
Yes,
are
yes,
they
yes.
like, do they just move on from the fact that their friends are missing? Or are they just kind of like, okay, well, this is weird, but off to our
Kind
activities?
of.
Okay. So I don't think that humans would do that.
So I agree with you. This is when we're into a horror movie fully at
Yeah.
this point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that that's something that, like, if I had watched it, you and I would have discussed. No, nobody's just going to be like, oh, okay, my friends are missing. Well, let's go off cooking. There would be more questions. There'd be more concern. There'd
Mm-hmm.
be more, we need answers. We need to find them. Are they on the same page of kind of like, this is fine, let's just move on? Or is like one of them good, the other one not so good?
I would say they're both kind of. So part of it is Christian is sort of annoyed that they are being accused of having stolen this book. So he, not knowing Josh is dead, is like, I can't believe Josh stole that book, and is like off getting all the good material
Okay.
for his thesis, right?
Which I think is a natural reaction.
And he's very sort of defensive of himself and his friends, but also like, I'm not affiliated with Josh. Like, if he did this, like, please don't blame Danny and I. We are trying to be very respectful.
Okay.
So it's depending on how malevolent we see this community as, like, to sort of accuse them as part of it, you know, kind of brings them in, right? If we think about gaslighting and some of this stuff, like in dysfunctional relationships, like accusations can be very much be a
Triangulating.
way, right, of being
Yeah.
like, no, I would never do that. I love you, or I
Yeah.
care so much about you. I would never hurt you that way.
Mhm.
So instead of me being mad at you for accusing me, I'm moving closer to you to like comfort
Protect.
you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly the dynamic that we're seeing is they make a little show of like Pele and his brother are often they're going to go look for Josh. So while they're going to look for him, why don't you guys go off and you go with the women and Christian, you go and meet the elders and, you know, do more of your anthropological study stuff.
Okay.
So the separation happens and, you know, we, the audience knows, I mean, they're in danger. It's hard to feel like anything else but like they are going to be picked off one by one at this point, right? But and this is a sort of piece of the puzzle that I haven't sort of shared with you yet. Part of the ritual of Midsommar is the sort of anointing of a May Queen, and it's basically
around the maypole.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, they every 90 years or however often they have this ceremony, it ends with the crowning of the May Queen. So while Danny is making meat pies and kind of connecting really with the women, you know, they're telling her about this and how it's so great that she's there and she's starting to dress like them and really sort of learn about the culture.
Okay, so I have to know, is the meat pies Josh and
so
Mark?
So it's a great question because that's what I assumed we were going to get was like the classic, like you find a tooth or you find a this, or you find a that. So later that night when they're eating, Christian takes a bite of his meat pie and it's actually hair from the girl who is trying to mate with him. Basically, yeah. Not hair from your head.
Oh, okay. But she's still alive.
Oh, yeah. No, the girl that's trying to mate with him, basically it's implied that this is sort of like a love spell, more or less. It's this is sort of something that they do when you're courting someone.
Yeah, okay.
And Christian even says to the elder, like, I think she put some of her hair in my meat pie. And the elder woman is like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, she's like, well, yes, she's trying to sleep with you.
Like that's what we do here. And Christian's just like, oh, okay. Oh, sure.
Yummy.
Yeah. Yes. So this is like the sort of fateful last dinner, right? Because we're sort of really getting to the end of the movie. There's only two characters that we care about left. And they have this dinner, and then it's time for the crowning of the May Queen. So the way that they do that is they have all the women drink this psychedelic tea is sort of what it's implied to be. Basically, it's like, herbs and stuff ground up, but there's definitely either mushrooms or some
This
sort of.
just sounds like Nine Perfect Strangers.
Oh, yeah, sure. But in a commune in Sweden.
Yeah, rather than a commune in LA.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, they dance around the maypole until there's only one girl left dancing, and she is crowned the May Queen.
And they stop dancing because they get tired, or because they get picked off, or like how?
Yeah. No, so basically the way that the dance moves is it's in concentric circles, so they get dizzy or they bump into each other, and it's very like innocent and playful.
Typical Maypole, yeah.
Yeah, aside from the fact of like the story that they tell before they begin the dance is like thousands of years ago, the man in black came to this community and the women all danced in response, and they danced long enough that they banished him or whatever. And so it's like sort of this sort of dark piece of like, you're going to dance until you can't do anything else. Like you're just sort of in a state
trance
of, yeah.
Okay.
So as Danny is drinking this tea and now hallucinating, as you can imagine, one of the interesting things is they sort of echo some of her first hallucinogenic experience. She's seeing some innocent things, but she's
probably seeing Josh and Mark's faces on other people's bodies.
No, actually, it's very. They very much are changing the tone of the experience, and I think this is where this is headed now, which is this actually healing for Danny?
Oh, okay.
Because she's connecting with some of these women. She's laughing, she's smiling, she's dancing. She's not, in fact, having these sort of scary flashbacks, and she's like fully in the moment, right? Okay. Of the dance. So much so that she actually wins. So she is crowned May Queen. And they have a grand May Queen crowning ceremony. And while that is going on, Christian is led off to
Man in Black.
No. Well, I guess eventually, but no, Christian is led off in a path of flowers to the young maiden.
Oh.
Who is presenting herself to him. Yes. Who is ready to complete her ceremony more or less with him. And earlier on, he had also been given some of the hallucinogenic tea. So his capacity for resistance to influence is much reduced. And he's sort of just like similar to Danny, like in a trance of his own. He's just sort of like, oh, this is where I go. Okay, you're sending me here.
Up until this point, is he intrigued and curious by this young maiden? Or is he like, nope, got a girlfriend, keep your distance? Or is he like putting on a show that he wants distance because Danny's watching, but he's actually curious and interested?
So I think because of the tension that had been established between the two of them, he's making a little bit of a show of, oh, like, that's nice that she has a crush on me, or she's putting the spell on me. Like, that's nice for this cultural thing, but I'm not.
Okay.
But over the course of losing his friends, and then Danny is gone from him over the course of this day, he is just sort of sucked in. He starts wearing the clothes. So he's wearing like a ceremonial robe. And then he's drinking the tea. And, all these sorts of things are happening where it feels like he is, I guess you could either say like totally checked out in the sense of like, are you fully present to what's happening right now? Or he's just sort of so, I guess you could say, acclimated that he's just not questioning anything. Okay. That's just, oh, this is my path. Okay, I'll walk this path of flowers. Like, okay, drink this tea. Like, okay, if you say so. He follows through on the ritual with the young girl, and there are also other women as part of this ritual, just sort of like cheering them on, more or less. As it's basically
your face when you have to say that.
I know it's such a weird thing to feel like you have to
like that
describe,
old,
but
like the old English traditions in like, or in like French traditions in monarchies where like people would watch the consummation of the marriage.
So exactly right, and that's what this is being depicted as particularly like a fertility ceremony, because it's been sort of pointed out over the course of them being there that it's like, oh, this is sort of a small community. Like, is there incest? Is there inbreeding, intentional or otherwise? And they're sort of like, yeah, it happens, but we also find a way to, and they literally say like, inject new blood.
Oh God.
And it's like said in a way of very like in passing, like you're like, oh, inject new blood. Like, how do you get new blood into the? And it's like, this is how. And this is how they do it. And after the ceremony is completed, Christian finally comes out of his trance, and he's now horrified at what he has sort of been. I guess the degree to which he's been in control of himself over the past several hours is in question.
So there is a question of consent.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, he's sort of like, even as you're watching him in the course of the ceremony, like he's sort of like in a I think a trance is a good way to describe it, because he's not really present to what's happening. It's more happening to him than it is happening with his own intent. So he's now horrified. He's running around. He's naked. He's looking for refuge. He's looking for Danny. He's looking for anyone. He goes into the chicken coop, which is like, oh, this seems like a good place for me to hide. And what does he happen upon? Like any good horror movie, is like, this
Josh
was
and Mark's bodies.
No, he happens upon our first American friend that we were told got a rental car and left.
Just the guy, though.
Just the guy. But Hayley, when I tell you that this is one of the most
pecking at him.
This is one of the most disturbing, like, body horror scenes I've ever witnessed.
Because the chickens have been pecking at him.
Well, that's happening, but I mean, again, I don't know how much you want me to say. It's
just go for it.
The way that they have him strung up is so shocking. Okay, so there is, talking about like medieval times, there is like, I don't know if you're familiar with this, there's like a very old horrifying form of torture that they did to people. No. This was like they would, I don't remember what it's called. I think they did it on Game of Thrones too. Basically, they like take your back of you off.
Oh, okay.
And
did you almost say they filleted you? Did you almost say that?
I did almost say they filleted you, because they do. They sort of, more or less open them up from behind. Yeah. And remove the rear of his rib cage and pull out his lungs as like wings. But the lungs are still inflating and deflating.
Oh my gosh, suggesting that he's like still potentially alive.
So he is still, to some degree, alive.
Okay.
But not alive, obviously. I mean,
yeah, because he would have bled out by that point.
But horrifying. So Christian, naturally freaks out. And because the members have seen him enter this place, they capture him. They blow a mysterious red dust in his face that makes him pass out. And that's the last we see of Christian for a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Because now
they can't leave it like that.
No, okay. They don't. Because now they bring us back to Danny, who is May Queen. And she is accepting and enjoying many of the aspects of this crowning, right? She's getting portraits of her and they're taking pictures and she's blessing the crops and she's doing all of these things. And while she's doing this, she does ask, like, oh, what's going on in that building? Where she hears, let's say, Christian ceremony occurring.
Oh, okay.
And they're like, oh, that's not for you. You don't want to go over there. And she's like, well, no, I do. Like, I'm going to go over there. So she looks into the keyhole and she sees her boyfriend engaged in non-very boyfriend activities. So she goes from
engaged in boyfriend activities to someone else.
Yes. She goes from this like very happy, feeling good place to this sort of horrified, I can't believe my boyfriend is doing this. Again, out of her own trance in many ways, place. Runs back to her bedroom. And this is like one of the more iconic scenes of the movie is she's just kind of scream crying. And all of the other women have sort of followed her in, and they start scream crying along with her. It is fascinating. It's fascinating because this is an emotional reflection. So they are experiencing her sadness and her pain, and they are reflecting it back to her, experiencing it back to her. And you see her face sort of become conscious of their reflection, and
relax.
Something shifts for her.
And she like kind of relaxes or like releases it. So I feel like that would totally happen, right? Like that's diffusion, which basically in ACT is like creating a separation between you and your emotional experience, and not a separation in terms of like not experiencing it anymore, but like experiencing it from a distance rather than getting caught up in it.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of like when my niece or nephew throw a tantrum, sometimes I'll like whine or tantrum back at them until they stop doing it. And so like to me, I'm kind of like, yeah, I think that's how that would go.
And you know, again, from like our therapist view, seeing this extreme form of validation happen in this context, but then also be working is like, whoa, where are we going with Danny now? Where does she go from here? Right. And she has this sort of emotional catharsis. She releases so much of this pain, and now it's turning to anger as she sort of releases the sadness of the loss, more or less,
anger
of this
at Christian?
person. Yes.
Okay.
Because the next scene that we see is the sort of final ritual, which is basically Danny as the May Queen is on a stage, and the community sort of reveals to Danny, mostly, but they're also sort of talking to the audience, like, this is what we do as part of this Midsommar, is like we sacrifice 9 people, basically.
Uh-oh, we're too short currently.
Exactly. Good counting. Yes, we're exactly too short. So with the last 2, they get 1 volunteer from the community, 1 person that just says, I volunteer to be the last sacrifice from our community. And then the May Queen gets to pick number 9.
Okay.
She gets to pick between Christian, who at this point is in a wheelchair, completely paralyzed, unable to speak or move because of whatever weird dust they blew in his face.
Okay. And she can see that he's like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Or just this other community member that basically got picked out by random, like a bingo like ball that rolled out. I was like, this is the other community member that you could also pick from this guy who you don't know. And Florence Pugh's acting in the sort of climax of this movie is incredible, because you see her experience this waves of different emotion where you can tell like she's realizing she's the only one left. These people who obviously she knew, she knew Josh and Mark to a certain extent, and she knows Pele, who's the person that brought them there. And obviously she knows Christian, but Christian has just done this thing, as far as she's concerned, like to her. He's cheated on her.
Okay.
So they're asking her to choose, and you don't see her say him or Christian. All you see is her face looking at him with like contempt and disdain, and like, but it's framed. She's in this ridiculous May Queen outfit, so she's just covered head to toe in flowers. But she has this look on her face of like,
I hate you.
Betrayal, really. Yeah. And then we jump cut to them wheeling Christian into the forbidden building. And that is where we see that the last part of the ritual is that this building gets lit on fire.
Oh, okay. Very Burning Man.
From the perspective of Christian, who slowly comes out of his paralysis, he is burned to death along with all the bodies of all the other people that have perished so far.
Oh my goodness.
And the closing shot of this movie is Danny's face going from despair and anger to a sort of a weird smile.
Hmm.
And that's where we end.
And so that's our time
Midsommar.
for today.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So interesting. My reaction is that at some point I kind of said experiencing these things will either be re-traumatizing, or if she can like reframe how she engages with them, it'll become healing in a way, which is kind of what they're suggesting. However, because it's a horror movie, they are relying on us as the viewers to have a very specific set of like morals and expectations and hopes for her as a person that we are like actually in our minds are like, well, she's not healed. She just made it worse. Right.
Sure.
And I think that like that really mirrors, and I was thinking this as you were talking, but I was so entranced in the story that I didn't want to interrupt you, which also happens in therapy.
Yep.
But I had this thought that we have to be really careful as therapists to not assume value. Right. And so like, so for example, there was like a time when to me, it was like, is she going to choose to stay with them or is she going to return with Christian? Like I kind of wondered if that was going to be the storyline.
Yeah. Totally reasonable assumption, but it's never even brought up.
Yeah.
It all sort of happens so fast.
Yeah.
And they explicitly say as they're sort of crowning her, like, you're our sister now.
Yeah.
And you're sort of half expecting her to kind of like come out of it in that moment of like, whoa, wait a second. Oh my gosh. Like, no, I have a family, you know.
Yeah, she's looking for a family.
Yes.
And she felt betrayed by Christian, who could have been her family.
Sure.
And so so my question for you was like, as I started to see it, like you were describing like she's laughing, she's engaged, she feels connected. My question was going to be like, is it sustainable? So oftentimes when we are in grief or change or seeking something, we'll kind of grasp the first thing that promises that, even if it's not sustainable. And that's a very natural, like fear-based response of like, I just so badly want a family. I will take on anybody who's willing to call me their family. And actually that's how a lot of like cult thinking happens. But also in this sense, it almost seems like it is sustainable for her, but they want us to have this opinion about how it's still bad for her. And I don't know if we can, I mean, I can decide that because I think it's stupid that they kill people, but like, we don't know that we can decide that for her. Yikes. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, right. So it's like, we don't know, obviously, and I think it's intentionally vague. Like, is she just like totally disconnected from her previous life and now is like lost in this community, and is that just gonna be her life, you know? Because she literally goes from, and to be fair, as she's watching Christian be burned alive, she is crying, right? Initially she sobs, right? But it's this transition as this is happening that feels very much like acceptance. And we don't quite know how deep that acceptance goes.
Yeah, because it's a movie.
Yeah, but I think it's so interesting because, you know, I think back to, you know, similar college experiences or people that I know that did travel abroad and things like that. And it's like, yeah, like I think I just want to move there. I think I just want to live there permanently. And this is like the horror movie version of that, where it's like, you know, I just like, I really grew to love the culture. And I just think, you know, I want to, that's where I want to be. And Danny's not explicitly saying that, but we are watching her move through her trauma in such a unique way that I think we're led to think that it's possible Danny could just stay, that this is, this is a new family for her.
She's now the May Queen. Yeah.
She's now the May Queen.
For the next 90 years. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I led off before we started talking about this movie. I was talking to you about how it didn't need to be a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's also like a really interesting movie underneath all of the murder, where it's like, what if this was a movie that was just explicitly about a breakup? And you could even take Danny's trauma out, which obviously sort of informs a lot of the plot development. But I just think it would be really interesting in general of seeing a relationship sort of drift apart in a culture outside of its own. I just think is really interesting
and very common. So
absolutely.
So an example that I will often give in this regard is I think there are tons of couples and marriages that would have survived if COVID shutdowns had never happened.
Totally agree.
And there were these people who had a very healthy, balanced relationship within the context of a culture that allowed them to go off and travel and do their activities and have their own friends. Together, but independently, right? And as soon as the culture changed and they were on top of each other all the time, it brought out aspects of the relationship that no longer worked.
Yep.
And I think that that's a very common thing, is that like context will change behavioral patterns.
Yeah, so that's Midsommar, and it's a wild ride, but I don't know. So having described this movie to you, obviously there are only a couple of scenes in which you were, perhaps literally horrified. Yeah. But that's why it's so interesting, because to me, the reason I think I like this kind of horror movie is that the moments of horror, while terrible, were actually couched in this like very interesting cultural study, which is such a weird,
so the story itself sounds great.
Yes, exactly.
If you took out all of the like her seeing her dead sister and wearing other people's face and breathing lungs and smashed people, like if you took that all out of it, it's probably something that I would watch, because it's not creepy otherwise.
No, right. Exactly right. Yeah. So, but I think the fact that, obviously they made it into a horror movie is one of the reasons also that it got such a passionate response from people, is that a lot of people really love this movie, in part because of the way it is a different type of horror movie. Yeah.
So on a scale from 0 to 5 meat pies, how accurately do you think they portrayed like the human experience?
So Danny's trauma in particular, I thought was handled pretty well. So we had flashbacks, we had, all which I thought were handled, obviously the horror elements of it, like seeing your dead sister in the mirror. Not to say that couldn't or doesn't happen in real life.
It definitely happens in traumatic loss.
Absolutely.
It definitely
but
can happen.
It's very much done in a horror camera of like, they're right behind you, just the way they looked when they died, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So parts of that obviously were framed a little bit more differently than they might happen in real life. But the traumatic response, I think, was handled really well. The relationship dynamics, I think we identified felt the most unrealistic. Like, oh, my friends are not here. Okay, if you say so, like that's weird. I think a lot of that felt like, well, this is a horror movie. Like that's how people get separated.
They're moving
and
the
bad
plot
things
along.
happen to them. Yeah. But I think outside of that, like horror movie trope stuff, like knocking one character off at a time, all the characters felt pretty grounded and accurately portrayed. So in terms of out of 1 to 5 meat pies, pretty good. I would probably say like 4-1. Like there were definitely some interpersonal dynamic things that were forced because it was a horror movie, but otherwise I thought it was really well done.
Okay. Do you think they reacted appropriately to the crazy stuff that was happening?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, the scene, the first time that you see them react to the person jumping off the cliff, I mean, I couldn't imagine it happening any other way. Like, if you go from, oh, what is this weird ceremony we're watching, to that person just jumped off a cliff to their death, and that other person just jumped off a cliff and now they're being mercy killed. Like there's no other way to react than the abject horror, I think, than that was acutely displayed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So despite being like a intentionally crazy movie, the way they portrayed the human experience is actually pretty accurate.
Yes, I would say so.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I think people might have things to say about Swedish paganism, and like this is not an accurate representation of like people don't actually maybe do this in the real world.
I would
But
guess, yeah.
right. But other than that, I think yeah, I thought it was very well done.
Well,
Yeah.
and like I don't know specifically about Sweden, but they're historically like human self-sacrifice and human sacrifice during festivals is actually fully human experience in history and probably still today in some cultures.
Oh yeah. So right. So
Yeah.
it's obviously based in reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what's sort of jarring for it, is that we as the audience kind of know that it's possible that there are still cultures that do this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then in terms of entertainment, I can't really ask you how entertaining it was for me to tell you this story, but
Yeah, it gets
I
a
can.
-5 either way.
Sure.
I'm not going to see it. I'm
and
never going to
it's
enjoy
even
it.
it's hard for me to describe how entertaining a horror movie is. I think for me, it's like almost like on a scale of 0 to 5 times I had to pause the movie. Which would, for me, I think be like 4 out of 5 pauses.
Okay.
I paused it a decent amount of times where I like needed to collect myself, and you can imagine which times those were based on my description.
Yes, I had to pause myself.
Yes, that's right.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I think that this actually, because for a while I was sitting here being like, well, I'm actually not asking that many questions. I'm not making that many observations. However, I think this actually really portrays how a first session often goes, because oftentimes a first session, a person comes and they're like, here's my whole life story.
Word vomit.
Right.
Yes.
And
yes.
my job in that session is to clarify, is to understand, is to make some personal observations that I don't necessarily bring up in that session. And I feel like we did that here. Now, one thing I will say is I had very explicit external reactions to the things that you were sharing.
Right.
I, in a first session particularly, would likely not have those reactions in the same way. However, I do work in a very relational way. And so when I feel an emotional reaction to something and I feel that it is therapeutically okay or validating for me to have a reaction to it, I do. I absolutely do.
Right.
Because modern therapy tends to be more human, I think. So yeah, I think this was a pretty, for us, I think it was a pretty accurate metaphor of how an initial
and they also
goes.
tend to go long, right?
Yeah. A 90-minute
yes,
intake
sessions often longer, yes, than your average session. So, I think there was sort of in some ways like no other way for us to do it than for me to, in many ways, like literally retell you the story. So if we were to do this again, maybe I'd edit out some of the points, but I think it was important for us to break down the sort of themes and ways that things were portrayed. And I don't think there's another way to do that other than me literally telling you like, well, this is what was happening.
This is the plot.
Yeah. So I had fun.
I enjoyed it too. Give us feedback. Like if there's things that you wish we would have done differently, let us know. Like I enjoyed this and I would love to do it again if people find it interesting. So please leave us a review. Let us know what you think.
Yes, we would love and appreciate that, because we'd be happy to keep kind of experimenting with the format if people are okay hearing us talk for an hour and 45 minutes.
So thank you for listening and following, and at Pop Psych 101. Bye.
Bye.